I look back at it with obviously huge regret because, as I said before, is that, you know, as a young man, but that's no excuse. You're on the front page of newspapers on a daily basis at times, but when every little detail is being played out for the whole world to read, and these days comment on, have an opinion on, it's a very, very difficult situation. Sometimes you make bad emotional calls, and I think I was definitely guilty of that. I wanted to recognise publicly that I apologise. In hindsight, there's mistakes I made, and over the course of the whole procedure, there's a lot of mistakes that were made. Wow, I wish I'd go back in time and a lot of people's lives wouldn't have changed as much as they have. If people choose not to forgive, then I understand that.
Hello listeners, and welcome back to yet again another episode of the Beautiful Game podcast. As ever, I'm your host Budge, joined by my faithful two co-conspirators Dot and Dej. Boys, how are we doing?
Yo, Budge, I'm all right. How are you, bro?
Yeah, not doing too bad. Keeping myself busy as ever, you know. But yeah, no, all good. How about you, Dej? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Obviously, I'm used to this quarantine period now. So we're just doing pods. So keeping healthy, keeping busy, keeping fit. So yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, man, not too bad. Same, keeping fit. Started Insanity this week with the family, so that's all good. Of course, the one positive from this quarantine period is of course that we can spend a lot more time with our loved ones and whatnot. So they're doing a lot of that, keeping busy, trying to shift some of this timber from my stomach.
Yeah.
So we are also joined by a very special guest on the pod today. He is currently the assistant manager at League Two side Stevenage. He was the head of Swansea's Centre of Excellence from 2007 to 2009, whilst the club was under the management of certain Roberto Martinez. He most recently, between 2013 and 2017, was the manager of England's women's team. And so without further ado, we welcome Mark Sampson to the platform.
Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no.
Good luck with Insanity, by the way.
Mate, it's not for the faint-hearted, I assure you. I mean, the first couple of sessions are really, put me through my paces. So I'm hoping that it gets a bit better as I go along.
No, it doesn't, I can assure you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it lasted about 4 days.
Goodness me. Right. Okay, so we are, of course, raring to go. We had a bit of a warm-up before we went live, and now we're ready to kick things off. So again, just wanted to thank you, Mark, for jumping on the platform to have a word with us. So we're going to kick things off and chat about your career. And where we wanted to start, so obviously, you know, you're, in terms of sort of management, you're still fairly young and in the sort of the early years of your career, shall I say. And even in this short space of time, you've managed to achieve quite a bit. And I guess you've been fortunate in the fact that you've had the opportunity to work both with males and females in the academies that you played, that you've coached at and whatnot. And I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is, what are the key differences that you've observed in the time that you've spent working with both genders? What are the differences in the game, in the way that they like to be managed, in the facilities and that kind of thing between the two?
No, this question is probably quite a regular question for coaches who've worked across both the men's and the women's game. And I think the basic differences are always going to be there. Obviously, the physical differences in terms of the speed and the power output. You know, the women's game is never going to be as quick as the men's game. And then there's also the facility and the funding and the finance difference. And again, there's a big disparity between the money that goes into women's game and the money that goes in the men's game. You know, men's game's been going over 100 years. Women's game it started a long way back. The men's game's got a big head start. So it'll take time, but you know, that gap is closing. But in terms of the sport and the players and the people you work with, I'd say there's very little difference. I've had significant challenges in the men's game with working with players, and some significant challenges working in the women's game with players. and also been fortunate. The majority of players I work with have been great people. So I think the challenges are there. You know, you've got to find a way as a manager and a coach to get the best out of people, to build connections and try and make them better every day. And if you do that, you're successful. And if you don't, you're not.
So Mark, just take us, back to the very beginning. How did you fall in love with the game?
Oh, that's a long way back. Do you know what? I think just playing it for the first time, to be honest. I think I was never a fantastic footballer. I'm not sure I ever at any point harboured ambitions to be professional, other than watching the FA Cup final and that dream that everyone had. But you're realistic from a young age, aren't you? What level you can and can't get to. But from the moment I started playing, all my friends are from within football. All my great relationships I've built are from within football. It's a sport that has given me so much, and I've been privileged for a long time to be paid to work in the game. But if I wasn't paid to work in it, I'd be playing on a Saturday or a Sunday to this day. I'd be coaching young people midweek. I'd be watching games on a Saturday with my family and my friends. It's just a game that brings people together. And, ever since I started playing, I wanted to be involved because my friends got involved. And that's always been something that's been underpinning my philosophy from day one, really.
Yeah, so in 2007, obviously you went to Swansea. Roberto Martinez was the manager, as Budge mentioned. Mm-hmm. So what imprint did he have on you from a philosophy standpoint?
Roberto was probably the first. I was never a professional player, so I'd never been around a professional club or a professional manager. My experiences of managers as a senior player were, you get a telling off at the start, you get a telling off at half time, and if you made the 90 minutes, you get another one. But Roberto was the first, other than Kenny, I didn't work with for long, was the first manager that I got a chance to spend a bit of time with, and he was fantastic. I've got to be honest. He was one of those people where you can't even describe the skill, but when they walk into a room, they just had an aura. They just had something about them that you just sat back and went, oh, I want to listen to this person, and what's going to happen now? What limelight, what information, what something is he going to give me to make me a better person today? So I haven't got a bad word to say about him. I thought he was outstanding in everything, from his coaching, from how you work with the players, his clarity, his philosophy. And don't forget his bravery at that level. Like Swansea were in League One at the time, and lads who had been told every time you get it, you put it in that area. Don't even think about passing it. A month later, we're playing like Barcelona. Same players. It was just incredible to see mentalities and mindsets change and shift. And how when you can get a bit of confidence and belief in you, you realise that actually these are skills I've always had, but I've never had the capacity to use. So I love my experience, and I thought he was outstanding, and really happy to see what he's done since. And I'm sure he'll go on to bigger and better things again.
I wanted to ask you, Mark. Of course, there are loads of different coaching and management styles, across the board. And you see some coaches and managers are very much directional and barking out orders and whatnot. Others like to get involved in the training sessions and immerse themselves as much as possible. I guess I wanted to ask you, how important is it for a coach to be fit? Is it really, really important for a coach to be as involved as they possibly can be? Or, is it just a case that, different styles work for different groups of players?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the wrong man if you're asking about physically fit. My insanity experience, speaks volumes. Probably the fittest I've been in 10 years at the moment, with all the chasing the little girl on the scooter at the moment. No, I think it's more a psychological thing and a role model to the players, isn't it? That you're willing to be a professional in every aspect of your life. I don't feel very comfortable as a leader asking someone to do something which you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. Mm-hmm. For example, do your work to keep yourself fit, recover right, get your right amount of sleep, have the right diet. Of course, I don't proclaim to be a professional athlete, but I think you can follow certain guidelines. And like anything, isn't it? If you're the leader and you say, but I do. I say, but I do what I want. I'm never sure that's a good way to create a good culture.
Mark, moving on, you went to Bristol and you spent 4 years there from 2009 to 2013. Take us through your time at Bristol.
Yeah, I mean, that was another great experience, really. It was a shot in the dark, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. I'd been, I think I was about 20, how old would I have been at the time? 2009, 26, 27, 26, I think I was. But I just felt I wanted an experience to be a manager. I'd sort of dipped my toe in at semi-pro level in the men's game. So while I was working at Swansea, I was doing a bit. The club I finished playing for, if I'm honest, I wasn't good enough to get the team anymore. So the only way I could get around it was, I'll do a bit of coaching. So I started dipping my toe in. And when I became a manager, even at that level, semi-professional, I loved it. I loved the pressure, the because when you're not the manager, you're not the person making the final call, you're following another person. So I just looked to the side. I've had a really bad haircut. It was self-imposed, so apologies. then when I had the opportunity then at Bristol to actually go in a different program, felt that was the thing to do, to give it a go. And, it was just an unbelievable ride, really, in terms of the success we achieved. Players, community, club. It's just one of those periods where everyone just clicks and it all fell together, and we achieved some amazing things with what we had, like lowest budget in the league, nearly winning it, getting the Champions League twice, FA Cup finals. It was just, at times you're thinking, I don't know how we're doing this, but we are. But it was just a great group of people in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, so Mark, that obviously led to England knocking on the door. For any manager, coaching the national team is probably the pinnacle of the sport. So how was that moment when you found out that you were getting the England job?
It wasn't one of those processes where I was headhunted. It was full application where I applied, went through numerous interviews and difficult challenges to get the job. So when they finally put it on the table, it's just, I'm honest, it was a real shock. I put my name in the hat, never expecting to get the job. And then when it came around, you just think, wow, you've actually got to do this now. And I was only 30 at the time. And, it was a young age really to jump into international management, but I felt this opportunity might never come around again. So now is the time to have a go.
Just on that, Mark, I wanted to ask, do you feel, looking back now at that point in time that you were appointed, do you feel that there's anything that you could have done to have prepared you in a better way to take on that role? If that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair comment, to be honest. When I reflect back, I just come off the back really of 5 years of success. Like I said, I managed to create an environment where we had a great group of people and we were punching well above our weight. And I suppose you feel a bit invincible, really, that, it's not easy, but so far what I've done, we've done all right. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those ones where it's easy in hindsight when you look back. I think it was more the football side of it was fantastic. I felt I was ready for that. But when you take the England job, women's or men's, obviously women's to a lesser scale, there's so many other things that come with it that, if I'm honest, only experience can you prepare you for that. And that, in hindsight, was probably something that I wasn't ready for, and learned on the job. But now you look back and think, well, yeah, they were tough lessons at times to learn, but hugely valuable lessons, not just as a manager moving forward and a coach, but as a dad, as a partner, as a human being. But you have to learn sometimes the hard way, and that's what life is about. And I feel, anyways, that you do your best, you do the right thing, you try and be a good person. And when you can't get things right, you need to learn and improve yourself, and hopefully you're better in the future as a result.
So, Mark, let's address the elephant in the room. What actually happened with Eniola Aluko?
Well, I think, look, it's obviously well documented, the situation and the story, and you know, there's a lot that went on that was reported and wasn't, and it was a very difficult time, you know, not just for the people involved, but the families, the extended families, the friends, the team, and I think, while I personally showed a huge sense of responsibility and regret, you know, you also look at it and feel that the situation could have been handled a lot better, from people above my pay grade really at the time, to make sure that everyone was able to move on in a way that gave them a chance to move on. So I look back at it with obviously huge regret, because, as I said before, is that, you know, as a young man, but that's no excuse. You try your best. Your intentions are always good, but sometimes you don't get that wrong, and you get that wrong. And as a result, now I've had a chance to reflect and look back and learn things. If I'm honest, I would never have learned. I would never have put myself in a situation to ask the questions I've had to ask myself, or speak to people who I probably wouldn't have spoken to about certain situations. So it was a difficult time, you know, for the extended family in the main. You look at it and think, anyone else involved in her side of family, her friends, and even myself personally, my family, you know, you're having a huge effect on people you love when you're on the front page of newspapers on a daily basis at times. So yeah, I look back with huge regret, but, you know, reflect that it was a valuable experience. I wasn't the person or the man I wanted to be then, and sometimes you've got to go through those tough experiences to get where you want to get.
Yeah, so Mark, obviously you had a lot of success with England. You fostered like a good dressing room ambience. There was a lot of the slogans, you know, to get the team on side. When you look at it, Drew Spence and Aluko, subsequently, they've gone through a lot of trauma. Like, you can see them in the press. They've had outcryings of emotions, and you can see that this experience still haunts them. So looking back now, what would you have done differently in the situation?
That's a very good question. No, I think those type of feelings will always be there for everyone involved. It was at the time a situation that was not just being played out on a personal level, but on a national level. And the way I describe it is that when you go through a difficult period, and that was a difficult period, a very difficult period for both Annie and Drew, is that it's very difficult in any circumstance, whether that's just between you and your employer, you and your friend, you and a family member. But when every little detail is being played out for the whole world to read, and these days comment on, have an opinion on, it's a very, very difficult situation. So when I look back, like I said, I think there's situations where you wish you'd handled better. And ultimately, the word is empathy. It's just having that feeling of that, do you know what, actually, you might feel a certain way at a certain time, but just because you might disagree with something doesn't mean someone else is wrong. And when you're involved in a highly emotional situation, sometimes you make bad emotional calls, and I think I was definitely guilty of that.
So obviously, you know, the comments that you made were about, you know, Eniola's parents and bringing Ebola to the game. So looking back, why do you think you made those comments?
I mean, look, it's difficult for me to talk about in relation to details because of all that's gone on, both from a legal and a perspective of where we all sit today. But as I said earlier, is that when you go through experiences, especially difficult ones, and it affects so many people, not just yourself, that you do have to take responsibility to go, well, why wasn't I aware of certain things? Why didn't I understand the implications of, though the intention was positive and good and healthy, and in the intent to help and support someone, clearly that wasn't the case. And I think, you know, you learn then about things that you just had no knowledge of. I mean, there's a lot of things as the person I am, I will never experience. But opening my eyes to other things that people will experience and other situations people will go through, and some unconscious thoughts you have that you're just not aware of. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that to challenge those thoughts, those unconscious potential prejudices or biases you may have, is that just take your time. Just, you know, have a think about what you want to say, what you're trying to say. And although the intention is positive, there's two people involved in communication. There's someone giving information, someone receiving information. So I think those experiences have put me in a position where I took it upon myself to go and get some more experience myself, to educate myself more and try and understand more about, not just for me, but how can I be a better person in society? How can I contribute to challenges and issues that people will have that I just never will?
As you mentioned, it was sort of like a trial by media. There was that famous game where England won 6-0 and the team ran towards you as if to show like a group of solidarity. They're with you, they're behind you. Could you explain how that moment felt? And at that moment then, did you know that you were going to lose your job?
I mean, the answer to the last part is no. I think there was, at the time there was some real clarity about where we were going and where we were moving forward and next steps. And none of those involved being dismissed in the near future. But I think, when I look at that moment, is that it's important to distinguish between you don't know what you don't know, which is a phrase I've used a lot in the past and will continue to use. I use it with my young daughter now. And, the comments that were brought up by myself and then I was obviously found guilty of and lost my position as a result and everything that's come with that were private conversations. And at the time, no one else was aware of what that conversation involved other than me and the person who had been involved in the conversation. So I think everyone looks back and thinks that whole situation could and should have been handled a lot better. But it was an incredibly highly charged emotional moment. And everyone, I know for a fact, the intention from everyone was to do the right thing and try and make sure that everyone could move on from that situation in a positive manner. But everything in life is easy in hindsight.
So, going forward, what, actions did you take to educate yourself? I believe you took a 6-week KickItOut training course. So what have you done to enrich, your perspective on things like this?
I think first and foremost, KickItOut were fantastic. They, at the time, they were chaired by a gentleman by the name of Lord Herman Housley, and he was brilliant. I'd never, during the whole process, I was cut away from speaking with anyone really. My responsibility was to my employer at the time, so I'd engage with them, but no one else. So you're obviously reading comments and views from other people outside, but you're not getting the chance to speak to people direct about the person and your perspective of the situation. So he was the first person I reached out to really. I picked up the phone, sent an email and just asked if we could sit down, and he was kind enough to invite me to the House of Commons actually, where it was due to have a 15-minute lunch, but we ended up having 2 or 3 hours together really, talking about not just this situation, but the challenges that his organisation were facing in the modern day game. And these were things I'd never heard before. I can't lie about that. I just hadn't heard about it. And obviously you're aware of it and you think about it, but it's probably quite shameful to say that in all my time in football, I'm not sure I've ever been part of a formal education procedure in relation to discrimination. I haven't, whether that's work in any organisation, there just hasn't been any formal education or conversation. It was just an issue that everyone was aware was happening, but there was never an open dialogue or a conversation. So that was the first time really I'd had that open dialogue and conversation, had my eyes open to there's some significant challenges as a game and a society we face. And then I enrolled on the course and spent some time with junior clubs and young people in areas that I hadn't been to before, which was just an enriching, fantastic experience. And not from a football point of view, from a human being point of view. And now I'm a father now, and I think my responsibility now is not just to me and my family, but I feel to educate the people I work with. And I've taken that responsibility very seriously. I'm at a football club now, a new club, where I want to open that dialogue and make sure that people feel comfortable to discuss issues that maybe aren't very comfortable discussing.
Mark, final one from me on this topic is, what do you say to the people that are saying, I'm not going to forgive Mark?
Oh, look, I think in life you have to realise that there are three types of people: people who agree, people who always disagree, and people who sit on the fence. And I've had to accept for a long time, not just through this situation, but for a long time before, once I put myself in a position that you're in the public limelight, that people will criticise, and whatever you do or try to do, they won't agree. My responsibility now is to be the best person I can be on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And if people choose not to forgive, then I understand that. I've put myself in a position where they have every right to do that. Feel I'm a defender who's dived in the box, and if the referee gives a penalty, he gives a penalty. If he doesn't, he doesn't.
Yeah.
But my career, my life has had to adapt and evolve. In many ways, that's been a good thing. But in other ways, it's hugely challenging, not just my family, but also personally, psychologically, emotionally, those type of things are still challenges. But I think I learned a long time ago to pretty much only acknowledge the opinions of the people I care about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just on that subject as well, Mark, I wanted to ask, since then, it's been a little while since the incident. Have you had an opportunity to speak to Drew or any? And if you haven't, and you were given the opportunity to speak to them, what would you say?
Yeah, it's a very good question again. And I think, unfortunately, given the nature of the way in which everything happened, there was so much legal ramifications and contractual obligations that a lot of that got in the way from the human side. And I think one of my biggest regrets is right from the outset, there wasn't a conversation on a human level. I look back on and when the information first come in and the allegations first come in, that there wasn't the opportunity to sit down in the room with someone who I'd worked with for 2.5 years, spent over probably 100 camps with, to discuss why they felt in one way and I felt in a very different way, and ultimately that became a real issue for me, because I could never understand where the other person was coming from, and as a result, the relationship became more and more fractious and more difficult, and I think it became more difficult to find a resolution. So in hindsight, that's something I'd love to go back and change. At that moment in time, forget previous, I talked about earlier, is just to have that opportunity to have a conversation on a human level. And ultimately now, I genuinely wish them all the very best. I came out and apologised when I felt the time was right, when the dust was settled. I didn't feel it was appropriate to reach out personally. I think given I put them in a very difficult situation, their reaction to me reaching out, I couldn't be certain of, whether it be positive or negative. I didn't feel it was right for me, wrongly or rightly, to put them in that situation again, given what had happened. But I wanted to recognise publicly that I apologise, and in hindsight, there's mistakes I made, and over the course of the whole procedure, there's a lot of mistakes that were made. And wow, I wish I'd go back in time and a lot of people's lives wouldn't have changed as much as they have. But I can't. So, like I said, genuinely now I wish them all the very best. They're two incredibly talented young people, and I'm sure they've got great Drew as a footballer, and whatever she chooses to do next, successful careers ahead of them.
Yeah, so Mark, in your spell at England, you took them ranked from 20th in the world to 3rd. So how did you go about changing the mindset and the dynamic of the team?
Yeah, it was just one of those situations where you get a really good group of people together, and you find that magic formula of a culture where people really wanted to be successful. And the biggest strength of that team was that they just never gave up. Whatever the circumstances, they kept going, and they were desperate to do well for themselves and their country. And we got on a really good run, really, that we challenged some of the mindsets that had been there previously, some of the limiters that were there, the feeling that, we we're going to compete. We'll do our best to get out of a group. And we challenged that and said, what's wrong with saying we want to win? What's wrong with setting our sights on winning a World Cup? Why can't we do that? The Americans have got 11 players. The Germans have got 11 players. So have we. And I think challenging those mindsets and the players and the staff buying into that gave us a great opportunity. And we were fantastic at a World Cup in 2015. To finish third that World Cup is just a monumental achievement. We went in there as the 13th best team, written off with no hope of even getting out the group. To finish third was unbelievable. And then to back that up with wins in the States, beating Germany, beating France, and then getting to another semi-final was just something you probably never dreamt would happen when we first got the job. But the players were brilliant. They really were. The staff were brilliant. And, like I said, I think everyone just gave it a right good go. And we were lucky enough to get a bit of luck when we needed it. And that culture saw us through, that never say die mentality.
You know what I wanted to ask, Mark, is basically, what you're speaking about now in terms of, that lofty achievement of coming third place. Over the duration of that tournament, did your perspective change in the sense that now you can obviously look back and it's a huge achievement? When you lost that game, was there that feeling like, we could have gone further, we could have got there, we could have done better? And over the course of the tournament, did it change? Were you initially going there as like underdogs, and it was like whatever happens, and then as you sort of progress throughout the tournament, you're like, well, hang on, we could actually win this? What was that like in the dressing room?
Well, I think we challenged our mindset from the outset, and it sounds strange, but I'm a big believer that if you keep repeating something enough, and you actually look for evidence that backs that up, rather than evidence that tells you can't do it, you'll start to believe it yourself. And I look at someone like Jurgen Klopp at the moment, and some of the things he was saying when he first took over at Liverpool, people chose to pick it apart. But actually, the players started to think about, let's look for the evidence that's telling us what he's saying is right. And you just start to believe more and more and more. And that's what happened with that tournament, is that we went in there with a feeling we could win it. And we convinced ourselves that everything that happened was just more evidence that we're going to win it. So, we've just beaten Mexico. Well, I told you we're going to win this. That's a great win, that one. Well, look, now we've come back from one goal behind. We've never done that before. I told you, hey, we said we were going to win it. And look, it's starting to fall into place. And obviously, come the semi-final then, you're wholeheartedly in. And actually, that was probably our best performance of the tournament. We played brilliantly. But you just didn't get the luck on the day. And you have huge regrets. You'll always look back and think, wow, we were, 90 minutes and 5 seconds maybe from winning a World Cup. But again, you can't go back in time. We did our best. It was a significant achievement. And something I'll always be proud of, really. That bronze medal will always take pride of place.
Mark, very quick one. Do you think that sensational World Cup run almost transferred into the men's team in the 2018 World Cup, where they came so close to, going to the final?
I'm not sure we can take any credit for that, but first and foremost, Gareth is a really excellent manager, really great guy, and he's done what a fantastic job he's done. But I think at the time with the FA, when I took over, I was lucky enough that there was quite a significant change. That there was a new technical director, a new director of performance. Gareth came in on the men's side not long after I started, and I think everyone just started looking at it in a very different way. And one of the biggest changes I felt within the team side of the organisation was that there was a real shift of focus from the X's and the O's, we're obsessed with tactics and strategy, to a real focus on people and actually making sure that the England environment was an environment that people wanted to come into. Because there's no doubt that at times that wasn't the case, and I don't know the men's players at all, but I'm sure you're the same as football fans. You read books, you read autobiographies. You had Rio Ferdinand on yesterday. I'm sure when he spoke, I heard some of his England experiences were far from positive when you consider what his Man United experience was like. I don't think that's just about winning. That's about creating a culture, an environment where people want to be part of. So I think that was the biggest change really across the team side, is that the culture shifted and suddenly playing for England became an opportunity, not a threat. people weren't scared of it. It was actually, I really want to be part of this team because I enjoy the company of my teammates. I respect the manager. I enjoy working with them. And there's a sense of belief that we could do something special together. And I do feel that did play out in the 2018 World Cup when Gareth and the team did so great.
Yeah, so you had an acrimonious exit from England, and it, now comes to light that it was due to a safeguarding issue that was relating to Bristol. Obviously, you lost your role, but it's been found that you didn't really have a case to answer, and the FA subsequently obviously came to an agreement with you. How do you feel now about the fact that you lost your role when you really didn't do anything wrong?
I mean, look, that whole process was a difficult one. And obviously post that, I took the legal actions you talked about to finally get some form of what I felt was justice in relation to that matter. But look, I think at the time there was so much else going on that maybe the position was untenable. And maybe I personally regret that probably I didn't take it upon myself to step aside and make sure that other matters that were being dealt with that we've discussed in depth here were given the chance to be dealt with impartially while I was an employee of the organisation. But that side of it, I can't go back and change. I was obviously pleased with the outcome of the legal case, and it gave me a platform to move forward. But at the time, like I said, the role wasn't right. The whole situation had got too big. It'd been so poorly handled that no one really was able to move on in a manner that was going to be right. So, for the wrong reasons, but actually probably the right outcome is how I reflect on that situation.
Fair play. And then obviously, Mark, on the 4th of July, 2019, you were appointed as the first team coach for Stevenage. And at this point, did you feel that it was just an opportunity for a fresh start, fresh ideas, and just a new opportunity?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I'd certainly taken my time. I think I wasn't a victim, but and people suffered far more than me. But the emotional and the mental scars of a situation you go through like that are difficult to get over, and you just got to find yourself again. You got to try and work out what person are you. So much about yourself that you thought was you had been challenged, and you have to go look in the mirror and go, a lot of what I thought was me, is it still me? Was that me? Was it not? What type of person am I? And I think that took some time to challenge that, and first and foremost make sure I was right to be a father and a good member of my family, because at the time I found that difficult. I'd shut myself off from everything really. Without going into depth, I was probably locked in the house for months, too scared to go outside, and that was having an impact on my young daughter and family and friends at the time. So I had to get that right. But after that, there was probably a number of opportunities that I was offered that just didn't feel right, whether that be in the women's or the men's game. But that opportunity just felt right at the time. I wanted to cut my teeth in the men's game and give it a go in the Football League. Always wanted to work in the men's professional game at some point, at first team level. And it's a great club, really, really is. I knew nothing about Stevenage when I was first offered the job, but having spent nearly a year there now, it's some great people, amazing supporters. I've loved nearly every second of it, even though we've had some difficult times in terms of results on the field.
Mark, later on in that year, there was another incident surrounding a rainstorm, and apparently what was reported that in coaching meetings, you were against signing a Nigerian defender because you said you weren't comfortable with building your defense with a Nigerian player because they always make mistakes. What do you have to say about those alleged comments?
Well, I think what was important for me to do was, at that time, how difficult it is. And you can imagine how challenging someone making that allegation against you could be, especially given my background and what had happened. But I knew from experience that you can only deal with it in one way, and that is professionally, honestly, openly, and going through the right channels, however much you might want to say yourself at the time. So that's what I went about doing. The club were brilliant. They heard me from the outset. They heard the other people who were involved, and they made their decision within weeks to say, we're clear what's happened here. Mark carries on as normal. Unfortunately for me, it was an FA charge, which I challenged, and the case was dismissed. I think what's important to know is that once the FA charge an individual and it goes to the next stage of an appeal, less than 5% of those appeals are successful at that stage. So to be one of those 5%, I think demonstrates how strong the evidence was and what the facts were. And for me now, it's just a matter, again, doing the right things. I've taken legal action against the people who made the allegation, and we'll wait to see the outcome of that. But for me now, it's behind me, difficult phase of my career again, but I've moved on, and luckily enough, the club stood by me, and I've enjoyed every second ever since.
Yeah, so Mark, you made the comments that you believe people in the game have an axe to grind against you, probably namely Dino, Marmia and Ali. How did you feel in that WhatsApp message when you were called a spineless cunt?
Look, I think it's difficult for me to comment on all that in terms of where I am with the next stage. But look, like I said, it was a hugely unsavoury incident, given what's happening in modern day society, and something that shouldn't have happened. I think obviously wish didn't happen. But now, again, I go back to those principles of you just try and do the right thing. You try and act in a respectable way. And one of the best books I've ever read actually was Michelle Obama's autobiography, and one of her famous sayings, isn't it? And when they go low, you go high. And I think that's what you can try and do. And it's something I've learned, that you just need to try and be the bigger person in the room and do the right thing. And I tried to do that. I feel I've done that, and it's given me a chance now to move on from what was a difficult situation.
Mark, do you ever feel that the involvement of the media isn't always sort of the best in that when sort of these incidents and these cases come up, it's always quick to make the news initially, but then sort of what happens subsequently isn't often spoken about. So like you mentioned, your case was one of the very, very few that actually comes out on the positive end, but that's not so glamorized or spoken about in the media. Do you find that quite frustrating then, that it's so widely discussed and spoken about in terms of the negative side of things, but then once you're acquitted, there's it's almost whispered.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a difficult situation, isn't it, in terms of the media at the moment. I think there's just in society, really, I think with social media and everything, it feels like people want to see others suffer and fail. And the recovery stories or the positive stories don't sell as many newspapers. But again, it's something you can't control. And I think if you let things you can't control affect you in a negative way, you're never going to be happy in life. And it's something I can't control. Yeah. All I can control is how I react to things. But yeah, it's definitely something that you'd like to think could be handled better in the future. But also there's some big issues to raise. And I go back to it, I think, the word education is a word that I think people in my era and even a lot of young people or older people have bad experiences of what education is, sat in the classroom listening. But ultimately that is the key, isn't it? It's about education. It's about people understanding things that they had little understanding about before.
Yeah, so Mark, obviously you've had a lot of controversy surrounding you in your career. So what's been the mental toil? Because people forget that you're actually a human being. Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you've gone through during all of these court cases, during all of the bad press you've been getting? How has it been being Mark Sampson?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been some difficult times. I'm not going to lie. But again, you have to just make sure that you're reflecting on who you want to be. And you've got responsibilities. Like I said, I've got a family, I've got a wider range of friends and a group of people who have always been critical and core to my life. And I wasn't as mature as I was back then, and you do. I remember a time when it all started to get really serious and difficult for a lot of people, that you would spend hours, and it sounds horrible, but you type your name into Google, you type your name into Twitter, you type your name into whatever other social media outlet is there, and you think, wow, I mean, the people are saying these things about you, and you know you're not the only person reading that. You know that people you care about are reading that. When you hear your family mention things that you go, well, there's only one way you know that's been said, and that's because you're trawling things as much as me. And that is always the most difficult thing, is that as a person, you deal with that yourself, and you think, I'll get through this, I can be resilient. But when it affects the people you love and care about, that's tough. That is really, really tough. And you look back and say, do you know what? The people who put themselves in those high-profile positions, there's a lot of extra factors that go with that. Yeah, there's some monetary reward, but all the other bits that go with it, the negative bits, can really be challenging at times. And I think we're seeing it more and more now, aren't we? Not just with sports people, but even the reality TV stars and all the situations we've seen going there. That, you know, it seems great from afar as a young person. I want to be this. But actually, there's a lot more to it, and I think those challenges can be really, really difficult at times.
Sorry, do you almost think, you know, some of the stick that you got online made you realize how painful words can be at times?
Without a shadow of a doubt, I think, and that was part of the process of understanding the difference between, like I said, is that, you know, your thought process is very different to the person you're communicating with. Although the intention of what you're saying, you feel is positive, is healthy, is good, is there to support and help people. And I think that was always the difficult part, is I've always prided myself on being someone who tries to get the best out of people and tries to make people feel better about themselves. So when someone's saying that actually what you said made me feel the opposite way, that's really difficult to hear. And it did take me a long time to understand what had been said had such difficult ramifications for the person who was receiving that information. So without a shadow of a doubt now, is that I go back to it, it's that education, that ability to just take a deep breath and understand that we've all been through different things. I don't know any of your guys' backgrounds, and you don't know much about mine, other than what you read a bit on Wikipedia from 25 onwards. So absolutely, of course. And you just then realise now is that because of these platforms are out there, it's difficult. And it's even more emphasis on everyone in society, really, to just think about what they're saying. Whatever you say about someone, that is a human being you're speaking to. And I think having that ability to take a step back, to think about how they might interpret what you're saying, is going to be critical to us all moving forward, let alone myself.
So yeah, Mark, before we wrap up, obviously it's been recently announced that Phil Neville will be stepping down from his post. So how would you assess the job that he's done taking over from you? And who would you say should be the next person appointed for the England managerial post?
Is it yourself, Mark?
I think Phil, I actually spent a lot of time with Phil on a pro license back in 2017, 2016. And Phil's a really, really good, honest, hard-working guy. And I think the intention he had when he went in the job was to take them from where they were to the next level. But that is a big step. It sounds a small step going from third to first, but that's a big step. You know, in fact, Liverpool have been trying to win the Premier League for 30 years. And they've always been there and thereabouts, haven't they? But actually getting from, I'm sorry to any Liverpool fan, third to first.
On the podcast, Mark.
I'm a follower. I'm a Cardiff fan, but I'm a follower. I hope they win it this year. If they don't, they might never. But I think to get that even like I said, it sounds like a small jump, but it's a big jump. And I think Phil has done his utmost to try and bridge that gap. But you know, it just hasn't quite got to where he probably wanted it to. But ultimately, took the team to a semi-final of a World Cup, which there's not many teams who've done that. I think there's obviously Gareth in 2018, 66, and I think us. I think they're the four England teams who have got to a semi-final. So It's not something that should be looked at in a negative way. And the next person who gets the job, I just hope they can take that team from where they are to that gold medal spot. Because
So who should it be? Should it be Emma Hayes?
I mean, good question. You have to ask the FA. But I think what's important is that the person who gets the job really believes they can take it on. The players buy into them, and ultimately everyone gets behind them. Because if you tie a manager's arms behind their back, they got no chance. It's important. Whoever gets the job, everyone gets behind them from the outset. Because if an England women's team can win a gold medal at the European Championships, a World Cup or Olympics, that will always be the platform that the women's game will look back on that can take to the next level. So whoever it is, I think there's a lot of people hoping that they can make that next step, and then the women's game can really get to a level where everyone can look at it and say, wow, they've come a real long way, and they have, but that next step's the toughest one. So whoever gets it, I really wish them all the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, thank you very
been a
much,
pleasure.
Mark. Yeah.
You know what, Mark? We've obviously spent this time looking back at your career, the early days. How you started off in the game, and of course what you're up to at the moment. Now looking ahead, you've obviously, you are still very young in terms of being a manager. You've got your whole career still ahead of you. In terms of the future and what the future has to hold for you, what things have you learned from your experiences to date that you will look to sort of draw from going forward in your role at the moment at Stevenage and subsequent roles later on in your career?
I think there's a lot of lessons I've talked about probably over the last 40 minutes or an hour or so, but I think one of the biggest ones I've learned about is making sure you always have a balance. I think as a young person, I was always fiercely ambitious, and was the word I'd probably use was obsessed with getting to the top quickly, getting to prove people wrong. When you're not a player in football, you're always a little bit out of the loop. It's always a bit, well, he didn't play the game, so what does he know? And I found that very difficult at a young age on coaching courses and in general when doors were shut quickly. But I became obsessed really with proving people wrong and sacrificed a lot to get where I got. But I think now I'll always move forward with always that sense of balance. And when you become a father, that changed you forever in so many ways, but certainly as a coach, because you just ultimately always ask yourself the question, would I want this coach coaching my daughter in this way? That's coach being me. So any person I work with in the future and even now, I'll always be thinking, well, actually, even if I've got to be critical, is it in a fair and honest way? And would I, if my daughter told me their coach had said or done this, could I say, actually, I understand what they're trying to do. And actually, I get their intention. This sort of help and make it more enjoyable, help you get better. So that's probably been the biggest one, a balance and just a general overview and understanding more of outside of football, what life is about and what type of human being you need to be really to get the best out of yourself and also become a better coach and manager. But yeah, you're right. I feel like 98, but I'm only 30. I'm 37 actually, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows what the future holds, but I'll take it day by day and make sure I've always got that balance, that's for sure.
Mark, final one from me. With all of the controversy that's happened throughout your career, will you still be open to making a return to the women's game?
I think you never say never, and ultimately the decision would be with someone else to give you the opportunity. And like I said, there was the opportunity at times to go back at a national level or a domestic level, but I just didn't feel it was right at the time. But who knows what the future holds? For all I know, we might get relegated this season, and I'm working outside of football doing something else. I'm back to being a full-time. I'd love that. Be back to being a full-time dad. Best job I've ever had. But who knows what the future holds? I'm just excited to get better day by day and see what the future brings. Like I said, football's brought me so many great memories, amazing pals, amazing experiences as a fan, as a coach, as a player. Wouldn't swap them for the world with all the negative things in there. So I just hope I get a few more before my time finishes up.
Mark, and it's a massive, massive thank you for coming onto the platform, and we respect you for coming on and speaking so honestly. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks Mark.
Gents.
Thank you. We
I've really
appreciate
enjoyed it. Appreciate your time and respect your questions, honesty, and good luck with everything. Like I said, I've listened to a few. It's got me through a good walk by yesterday, the Rio Ferdinand interview. So I'll definitely be a fan now for future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mark, and thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for listening in up until this point in time. Just a reminder, if you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you do. The Beautiful Game Podcast on YouTube. Also follow us on Twitter at podcast_TBG and on Instagram at pod_TBG. And a quick reminder that you can listen to our episodes also on Spotify, SoundCloud, and on Apple Podcasts as well. And if you are listening in on Apple Podcasts, please make sure you leave a 5-star review, because your engagement helps us build and develop the platform for us to continue to deliver episodes like this. So we hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Over and out.
Peace.